G'day and welcome to the Campfire Project. Today I'm here with, first of all, Adrian Hanks, who is an inspirational author, coach, psychotherapist and speaker. How are you, Adrian?
I'm really well, Alan. Thanks. I've got a few things going on in life, but I'm not getting down and depressed, which is what the show's all about.
Excellent. And then we have Bob Eden, who is a counsellor and depression recovery specialist. How are you, Bob?
My life is absolutely awesome, mate, because that's the way I create it.
Excellent. And we have Marie Alessi, who is a legacy coach and loves life after loss. How are you, Marie?
Loving life after loss. I'm absolutely in a good space. I'm happy to be here with you, gentlemen.
Excellent. The reason we're talking this way is today we're talking about pathways out of depression. And it's a major issue at the moment with the number of people after the COVID, the fires, the floods. And you think that when they were over, people might think, oh, all that stuff should be gone, but stuff hangs around. The depression does stick around for a long period of time. Adrian, would you like to start us off on this conversation? Because when we talked earlier on, this is the one that you proposed. And
Sure. Well, Alan, look, and touching on the subject, the last 2 or 3 years for many people have been really challenging in the world. And as you rightly said, what happens often after an event is the post-event, and depression often creeps up, after a big event. And with all the propaganda, all the information that people have been bombarded with over the last 3 years, it's got to the point where that depression set in for a lot of people. I know organizations like Beyond Blue are up sort of 40 or 50% in all their phone calls every week. Suicide rate is up. It's quite appalling what's actually happening on the planet. And those of us in the field of working with people like myself, seeing the challenges people are having around depression. But I think firstly is understanding depression is really important, because often it's misdiagnosed. And there's a few little pointers. I've taken a few notes here. And what to bring is, oftentimes people go, and if they're not depression specialists, and some doctors are and some doctors aren't, it's very easy to diagnose depression, where in fact it could be what I will call loneliness. Yeah, it could be self-doubt. It could be a case of self-hatred, lack of self-love. And unfortunately, they get diagnosed as depression, and their medication's given depression. And then they have to take medication on top of the medication to overcome what they're going through. So firstly, it's really important to define depression. And that also has got a few different viewpoints depending on where it comes from. There's a medical viewpoint, and then there's what I would call in my profession, soul depression, where it's about not following one's purpose, not following one's passion, not being connected to source or spirit or God or whatever one wants to call it. So there's a few different aspects of how one defines depression. And I think, we can certainly have that discussion today on those different definitions of what it is. So that's probably a good lead in to the topic of depression, because it's wide, it's widely viewed. There's been some recent research just come out actually a couple of months ago, I read, where they often use melatonin and things for depression. And it's being proven now in some research that depression is actually not in the mind or not in the brain. This is whole new research. Some of us have been down that path for 20 years, but now the medics and the scientists are starting to agree, saying, well, perhaps it's not actually in the brain. It's not to do with the synapses. It's not to do with the brain. It's actually more of a physiological, soul or heart condition, which is what I adhere to. I've been talking about that for 20 years, saying it's not here, it's here, and no medication is going to change what's happening in the soul. So so that research is, I can probably, when this is up, I can probably put that link into that research.
That'd be good.
Yeah, it's really some great.
Well, Adrian, that so resonates with me, my friend, because how can I put it? This has been my life's work since 1984, when I first had my first panic attack. And I'm a slow learner, and it took me 20 years to realize that I was using my amazing intellect to try and think my way out of this depression, plus having the burden of all these weird toxins in my body. And it was only once I could silence my mind and listen to my heart, and then I realized that depression was just a spiritual wake-up call. It was my inner knowing, my spirit, my body memories telling me, bang, Bob, you are not living your truth. You are living in the matrix, in this construct. And it was only through I call it a wound of the soul, and it so explains why since 1880 no psychiatrist or psychologist has ever claimed to have cured anyone, because they only work with the mind. And then they do not want to cure anybody because they lose customers and they would lose their income. So and I'm glad to be part of this, sharing this message, because my mission is to eradicate suicide, is that we have been lied to since about, but about 1880, in the birth of psychiatry in Bedlam, where if you were an unwed mother, you were classed insane. You were banged up for life. No jury, no trial. If you were homosexual,
I'm insane.
same deal.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but and this is what drives my life. This is what keeps me fired up. And I would love to get on and do a TED talk, but what que sera. I'm more than happy to support anybody that comes to the realization that, for me, there is nothing wrong with you. If you're suffering from depression, and for me it's not grief or loss, or it's my body is so much smarter than me. It knows what it needs, and these messages I get, if I listen to them, everything's rosy. If I don't, bang, it's back into depression. So for me, it's all about not living in your headspace, but living in your heart. And that is where I found all my solutions, living in my heart. Yeah. Yeah. And
I love it. And Bob, if you don't mind, I just want to quickly say something here as well, because the whole loss and grief, in that space, that's the space that I work on, I work in the space of healing grief and healing all the aftermath that you feel when you go through loss. And there is this very common belief that you cannot ever heal that, and I don't agree with that, because I've done it and I provide those solutions. I love that. It's so beautiful, because at the end of the day, it's all about listening to the emotions that come up. And I've seen, and I actually want to find it and share it in the notes as well. And it's funny because my mentor sent this to me and said, "Oh, here, you should watch this, Marie." And he sent me this 2-hour talk. And my first reaction was, I don't have 2 hours to watch something, and it's like when somebody sends you something, you have to watch this, and it's 2 hours. But when I started watching it, I couldn't stop it. I had to watch it in a couple of drips and drops, but the whole talk was about how in the space of grief, the number one thing that most people get offered, in particular in the States, luckily not as much here, but in particular in the States, is antidepressants. And antidepressants do not heal grief. They don't work in grief even. And there are studies done that they do not help in grief. Often, or sometimes, I shouldn't say often, sometimes you can develop depression in grief, and sometimes they can help, but mostly they don't. I'm just going to leave that here for now, and I'll share the link if anybody wants to watch through the 2 hours. I have to now say every minute was worth of it. It made so much sense. Yet what we need to provide is a path out of it. I think it's not even so important, probably important to know where we pick people up from, but it's more important that we provide a path out of it. And that's what we came here together for. So I'm really glad to be here with you, gentlemen.
Well, my understanding of antidepressants is, and it's intentional, as bastards, it's intentional. Taking antidepressants disconnected me from my feelings.
That's the purpose.
Get into my feelings that I could heal myself. And when I had my first panic attack in 1984, and my body would just throw itself around, and I was just totally overwhelmed with the feelings that were coming out. I didn't realize at the time it was a message from my body. And so I went to the doctor, lovely doctor, he delivered my son. He put me on Ativan, benzodiazepines or something. I was on them for about 2 years, not 2 weeks. But with hindsight, okay, so that was useful for me, because I just, I wasn't in control of my body at that time. It was trying to get shit out, and I was trying to stop it. But I realized by going back now, and what I was most afraid of was how powerful those feelings that I was having were. And that was what I was afraid of. But now what I realize is that power, the power of those feelings, is simply a measure of how powerful I truly am. And so embracing that and letting go of any fear I have of expressing my feelings, you know, I feel as if they've taken a couple of elephants off my shoulders. But you know, it just feels so light. And people say that, you know, going back to the, like, for me, all the damage got done in the first 7 years. And people talk about all this, you know, all that trauma, and it was child abuse in my day. Trauma was the trendy word. But all those wounds get smothered by your subconscious, you know, and, you know, just so you can function. Now, I don't agree with that. For me, I'm going back to my body is smarter than me. For me, all those wounds that I suffered became body memories. My issues are in my tissues. So by listening to my body and vomiting out, and I did on my boat, I just threw the meds in the bay one day and just let my body do what it wanted to do. And it's not something you want to do in the supermarket, because they'll throw you in the loony bin. But I just shouted and screamed and farted and vomited and slept and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried until I was absolutely exhausted. And something I come to realize, doing feeling work, doing emotional work is amazingly draining. But, you know, it takes a lot of effort to pump all the shit out of the swamp.
It's
That's
certainly
why you need people around you and that to be able to work through those things. See, back in the 80s, I went through a bit of depression then with things were happening at work and at home and everything else. I got on the medication, but I realized that it was designed to separate you from your emotions. It was designed to numb you down so that you could get your head around things. But the problem was that most people, once they started it, would stay on it and they stay in that state. So you never deal with it. As you said, it's all in the tissues. As you've said, Adrian, every memory we have is really stored in every cell of our body. Totally. And so the body has the answers, not the brain. And it's like when I was working as a massage therapist and working with terminal patients and talking to them, they were always saying, I want to change the way I'm thinking. And I'm going, we're not going to change the way you're thinking by thinking about it. You need to tell me how you're feeling when you're thinking this way and how would you prefer to feel? Okay, tell me about, if that's the way you like to feel, what are the things you've done in the past? What have, you know, if you have that feeling, what are you doing? If they're talking about walking down the beach, I want to know hard sand, soft sand, in the water's edge. What are they smelling? And get all their emotions aligned with it. And next thing you know, their thoughts align with that. You didn't change their thinking by changing the thinking. You changed their thinking by going through the feelings. So the emotions, it comes back to the body.
Yeah.
Always, mate. And how I start often, Alan, when I'm working with my clients, I say, you know, you've been labeled, you know, depressed, but let's define that for yourself. So it's individual. Let's put the spotlight on what you call depression. I say, if you can name it, you can tame it. So what I have to do is I start with a lot of art therapy. I get them to do some art therapy, and probably, you know, 9 times out of 10, I would say most clients, when they draw the idea of depression, they draw a box and they put themselves in the box and they really are like depressed or they're squashed in. And then it's a case of how can you break out of that depression? How can you break out of that box? How can you free yourself, you know, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? And then we have to find, you know, pathways out of depression by finding pathways out of that depressed, boxed space. And for many, it's finding that new vocation, it's finding that new passion, it's finding their life purpose. And once people find that breaking free, oftentimes there's no time or room for depression. You know, artwork for me, you know, if I can put a crayon or a paintbrush in somebody's hand or get a pen in the hand, write poetry, there's no time to think or to be in depression. There's a beautiful cultural thing in South Africa. I spent a lot of time in South Africa with the medicine men, the Sangomas. And if you're not well and you go and see a Sangoma, a medicine man or a medicine woman, the first thing they say to you is, are you following your life path? And if you're not, that's why you're sick. Like for them, it's really simple.
Yeah.
So I believe
I think that's exactly it.
You're going to get depressed, you know?
bringing it back to simplicity, because we so overcomplicate so many things in our lives, and we are so trained to do it. You know, it's such a normal thing for us now. And what you said, Adrian, I really like that, the label of depression. You know, I deal with labels all the time. And speaking about TEDx talk, I actually did a TEDx talk on redefining our image of a widow, because it is all about the label. You know, I don't think I fit the label of a widow at all. So I spoke about that. But once we label ourselves, and in particular with a label like depression, that is such a heavy label, we start living up to that. So we might have not been as depressed before, but sure enough, once we get the label, we get all the signs for it, you know, and we start living up to it. And we really, and then we have the excuse for it too. You know, there's no healing in labeling. There's actually just reinforcing that behavior, that thinking, that perception of self. When we get that, like, oh, I'm depressed, you know, oh yeah, and make it even worse, and you know, under what's the word I'm looking for? Just really find the proof in the medication that you're given, you know. Oh yeah, and I'm on medication too, and then you name all your medications, and everybody who's ever dealt with depression knows exactly what you're talking about. You know, it's that whole, I'm part of a group now. You know, I know what it is now. Now we can deal with it. No, you don't. It's actually not the depression, like. The labeling does not heal you, does the complete polar opposite. And often people say, well, we have to label it so we know what to do with it. No, we don't have to label it. We just need to find a way out of whatever state it is. We don't need a label for it. We just want it to be happy, you know.
That's where our problems are coming from, are those labels that we give ourselves and other people give us, and we take it as a badge of honor. You know, and it does. Yeah,
exactly that.
My favorite tool in my therapy session, I say to my clients, how many of these would you like me to stick on you today?
I love it. Have you got enough of those blocks?
But the good thing about it's the same thing of using those labels, you can shift them around anyway. You can decide which ones you want. You use labels to sort of plan things out. You go, I don't want that one anymore, and you throw it away. How easy is it to throw it away? Why can't we do the same here? So we have the label. We keep talking about mental health. And every time we use that term, we know that the health industry is really the sickness industry. Everything we've got is all sickness.
Thank
so
you.
When we use the word mental
you.
health, we're telling ourselves that we're sick. So, okay, what I'm working with, the Campfire Project and the Business of Smiles, it's all about, and I know the work that you do, it's about removing the stigma of mental health and then talking about emotional wellness. That is, as you said, Adrian, we're moving towards something, our life purpose. You know, my thing is to be emotionally well. And therefore, if that's the focus I've got, I'm not even looking at mental illness.
And sadly, Alan, what happens is when people don't have a positive identity and they label themselves something like I'm depressed or I'm ADD or whatever else it is, it gives them an identity, albeit a false identity, because we all need a sense of purpose. We all need a sense of identity. I mean, that's been spoken about for 100 years. So if people can't identify in the positive, they will identify in the negative. That's just human nature.
What I would like to say, Alan, is you've touched on a really important point there. Like for me, first thing I did when I went to school, I was taught to spell, but I was taught to spell their way. Now for me, my words are my spells, so I do cast them wisely, for the universe is always listening and takes everything I say literally. But for me, depression cannot exist in a sovereign being. And what I mean by that is that day on the boat when I threw my meds away and got through my purging process, I'd just become a ship's captain. And the first time I took a boat out, bugger Bob, the buck stops with you. You're responsible for the lives of all these people on the boat, even the vibe on the boat. So all I did, I took that ideology and applied it to my whole life. Yes, I am master and commander of my life, this life that I do create, and I do take full responsibility for it. And so my next step into sovereignty was, okay, what is my life purpose? Well, I am master. I will set my life purpose. So I set my life purpose to simply find my own truth. So I started questioning everything. And how do I know what is my truth? Whatever resonates with my heart. And so once I made that step into sovereignty and took full ownership of my life, there's no room for depression. It's a non-starter. And then the last stage of my sovereignty in like the emotional side was, well, I'm a spiritual being, have a physical human experience. How do I want to experience this life? So I set my own conscious life intention, which is, I am the power of I am. I am here to have a gentle, joyful, loving, healthy, and abundant life. Now, since I put that command in place, that is precisely how my life is unfolding. I'm just kicking back and the universe is doing all the hard work. And it is. One of my mottos is the KISS principle. Keep it simple, sovereign.
Yeah. And I think the challenge is, isn't it, often, you know, if the minority is probably what we're in terms of that spiritual awakening space, is then where did the 90% mass go to get that understanding to help them through depression? And that's the challenge, because a lot of people don't seek out, you know, spiritual teachers or spiritual masters or psychotherapists. They go to the doctor and the doctor just gives the pill. So how do we change that paradigm is my question, to help people to be more aware of there are alternatives than taking a pill. And I think this is where the new education on the planet really needs to come to the fore now. And, you know, and thank you, you know, for sharing this platform.
What is working for me, Adrian? What is working for me? I realized years ago as a counsellor, I can't wake anybody up. That's not my job. Everybody's on their own hero's journey. People are looking for answers, but probably maybe asking the wrong questions. I might have the right questions, but my posture now is the best thing that I can do for my neighbor, my physical neighbor, or anybody I connect with, is to just simply let my own light shine. And people are drawn to that. And they say to me, Bob, why are you so bouncy? Why are you so, well, I say, sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm sad, but I'm always content. And this is how I did it. If you know, if you want to know more, this is how I did it. If it resonates with you, great. And it may not, because we're all unique. The challenge is to find what works for you as an individual. And I propose that the only place you will find that is in your heart.
So you said two words there, or a couple of words, phrases, etc. To me, I think are the most important. You kept on using the word "my," and my own, etc. And that's the whole thing, is that it's about finding your own purpose, not somebody else's. This is where we get so many people jumping in and telling us what we should do. I know that the research has shown that recently it's got to the point that where somebody is starting to talk about an issue in their life, the record is, before somebody jumps in and starts giving advice, it's 19 seconds. How much information you get in 19 seconds? So when somebody does that, you know that they're telling you about them. They're not talking to you about you. And that's one of the things I realized. But it's, as Adrian said before, it's finding our own purpose. And you use the word "my," keep talking about, well, it's mine. It's not somebody else's. It's my life. It's my decision. It's my cells in my body, etc. It's my inner voice talking to me. And which voices am I going? I jokingly tell everybody there's a different voices going on in my head all at the time. I just hope they don't all talk at once. But we do have that, and to listen to the voice that's giving us better advice. If I'm hearing different voices, I'm going, well, which one's giving me the best advice here? And the voice that I'm listening to, is that a reflection of what somebody else has been telling me, or is it me?
I love that you say that, Adrian. I believe the absolute key word here, and for the entire talk that we have here together, is listening. The listening to other people when they speak, to actually understand, not to respond. Like the beautiful cliche that everybody knows and doesn't really listen to. And the other one is the listening to ourselves, to our heart, to really tune in. And I have to say, I have to take my own advice here in terms of, I love that. Do you see the raising hand?
Yep.
It happens to me all the time for the last 3 months. Rob butts into the meetings. It's not me pressing the buttons. When he agrees with something I say, he puts a raising hand or a thumbs up on my screen, and I'm like, thanks, babe. wherever that's coming from, it's happening in every single Zoom meeting. I'm glad that you just witnessed that. So this is my husband. Hi, he says hi. So the listening to your heart, the really tuning in, the understanding, what is my heart actually trying to tell me, and us not taking enough time. I'm not saying everyone, but the majority. And I'm part of that. And that, although I am on quite a spiritual path and very open to it, and I'm, you know, I'm leading a group of 3,500 people through that pathway of, you know, the depths of the grief and showing them ways and tools out of it. Yet I need to put that hand down. I'm sorry. Sorry, babe. If you want to say something, say to me. He doesn't let me. Okay. And this is just a reminder for myself as well, you know, to take out more time to really tune in, to make this a regular, and not just, oh, when it's really, really bad, and then, yeah, maybe I should finally sit down and listen, but really get to this. We get so many nudges. We all do. All the time, you know, if it's like a physical, when we don't look after our health, then, you know, the little things creep in, and you go to the car and you go to the massage and you go to, why don't we just listen to what is the message of that pain? What is the message of that nudge? If it's happening over and over again, you're obviously not listening to something. So I think that's where we all need to start, with the listening part. And this brings me to one other point that I really want to make here, is to choose your surroundings, you know, to choose the people that actually have that path, that choose that path, that are on this path of wanting to heal, wanting to be happy, wanting to take things on in their lives, and have their heart wide open to it. Not the naysayers, not the ones that, I had so many people tell me, oh, that will always stay with you. You'll always have a hole in your heart. And I'm like, no, I will always have a place in my heart for Rob. I refuse to see that, you know, I don't have a hole in my heart. He would fall right through. I don't want to have a hole in my heart. I want to have that place in my heart where he sits in there and he'll always be with me, you know, and that's beautiful. But I refuse to see people's perspective when it's a negative one, and when there are so many people coming in saying, like, you can't ever heal that. Well, says who? If you say that, you'll believe it, and absolutely 100% right. You won't heal it.
Yeah, whatever you tell yourself will always be true.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you tell yourself.
Yeah, and I think for anybody listening in, watching in, who, you know, has a sense of being depressed, a couple of key points. Firstly, would be probably to spend some time and really get a sense of, what does the depression mean for me? You know, how do I define my depression? And secondly, you know, please go and seek some support with a professional. And I'd suggest, you know, not to condemn any doctors. You know, if you've got a great doctor, fantastic. But please, you know, try and avoid just going down that road where you're just going to get a pill to try and cover up the depression, because we know if you don't deal with the emotions, as, you know, Bob and Marie and Alan and I have suggested, if you don't deal with the emotions, nothing changes. And when you're on that medication, it's really hard to get into that emotional space to deal with the emotions in the soul. So, you know,
just prolong it. You don't heal it.
Prolong it. So, you know, go and get some professional support. You know, hairdressers are great, you know, to talk to, but really go and get that professional support to get you up, because, you know, within a 3-month period, you can certainly, you know, and less for some people, really shift that whole paradigm out of depression into the sense of joy and passion. I've seen it, I work with it, and it's very possible.
Well, here's a little trick I used, and it was an inspirational thing. This is about 94, and I'm living in Fremantle, Western Australia, working for Sarich in automotive research, which was great for my intellect. My intellect loved it. But I was heavily depressed, heavily medicated, in so many support groups, it was unbelievable. But it just came to me. I went into work one day, and Mick was coming down the corridor, say, "G'day, Bob, how you going?" And I just looked him in the eye and said, "Do you really want to know?" He said, "Oh, no, just being polite."
Exactly. I love that.
The next person I met said, "G'day, Bob, how you going?" I said, "Well, do you really want to know?" And he said, "Yeah." So I said, "Well, you know, this is happening for me, and I'm feeling really lost and vulnerable, blah, blah." And by responding that way to everybody that said good day to me, and said yes, they wanted to listen, I built my own little support group at work where, you know, a bunch of guys, we created our own safe space during work and eventually outside of work, where we could just sit and be real with each other. because there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. For me, being vulnerable is just a human being being human.
There's everything right with being vulnerable. I want to say that.
It's the most powerful place one can be, isn't it? Surrender and vulnerability.
It's such an Australian thing, the how you going, not bad. And I always follow up with, so you're good. And they always look at me totally puzzled. It's like, there's
tell me
nothing
what
wrong
you
with,
are.
so there's everything right.
Don't tell me what you're not. Tell me what you are.
Exactly.
But it's like, if they say to me, fine, I go, all right, so you're freaked out, insecure, neurotic and emotional. Would you like to tell me, would you like to talk about that? It's the best
I'm glad you used freaked out, because I used another word, but
I always try and keep it polite, But there's like these socks, they represent, the black dots, the tough times we go through in our lives that we're not going to get out of. The yellow, the warmth, the wind, the sun, the camaraderie of having the right support around you. When you got the right support around you, got that sunshine, those black dots can't join up. But if you don't have those people around you, the black dots will join up. You'll end up with a black pair of socks.
I love it.
That's the
Alan, can you I'll give you my address. Can you send me a couple of those pairs, or let me know where I can get them from? Because I am a sock man. Let me I love it. I do love my socks that I wear.
Oh, I wish there was show and tell. I would have brought mine.
Yeah, but this is the sort of socks I wear, so I'd love to wear some of those socks if I can get some from you, mate.
Not a problem. We'll put that in
the right socks stop depression. I'm sure of it. Better than any pill. Wear your bright socks.
Well, those socks, with Scott Carson started with his Sunday session, and then I introduced him to James Short. They then created the Business of Smiles, and that's now a charity that we're all part of. And Scott used to run with those, a big smiley, or still does. I don't think he wears any other socks except for those. But he had the big smiley T-shirts on, and he had these bright socks. And of course, people couldn't help but look at them and start grinning, and then look up and see his face. And the conversation was on. And being able to walk up to people and just pass those socks to them. First of all, thanking them for hanging in through COVID, through the floods, through the fires, giving support to other people. And some people have said, might be there with their kids. And they say, well, I haven't really done anything. Well, you looked after your children. Well, can I gift you a pair of socks? When the person takes the socks, they tell them the story of the socks. And the number of people that have then broken down and started telling what they've been through, and have actually been back in touch with Scott and with James, saying, look, that really not only changed my life, it saved my life. Or I passed the socks on to my son or somebody else in the family, and it's had an impact on those. Scott has been posting recently a lot of the talks have been going into schools. And one of the girls came up to him and said to him, look, are you going to this other school? And he said, no, it's only just here in Lismore that we're coming. She said, my best friend goes to this other school, and she's really could do with something to cheer her up. So he said, can you do me a favour? And he said, what's that? He said, can you take a pair of socks to her? And you should have seen what Scott said, you should have seen the look on her face. Another one, her twin sister was home sick, and she came up, she apologised. She said, but can I ask you, is there any chance I can get a second pair? And of course, Scott said, well, what would you like the pair for? He wanted to know the story. And so she was over the moon to be able to take that home and give it to her sister. Oh. So we all want to help each other. This is the thing, when somebody steps up and they start to talk, we don't have to take it on. We realise it's what they're going through. And if we care, we just hold their space.
I'm going to be watching out for those socks now. When somebody wears them, I'm like, I love that you're wearing sunshine on your feet, How do you know me?
It's, we've got people around the world who are starting to get the socks as well. One of the things we'd like to see a bit of a challenge out there, a bit safer than the water bucket thing that they did in the past, but for everybody to have socks and taking photographs in some, interesting places. Like one of the people that James gave a pair of socks to was the Barefoot Dutchman. This is a guy who's walked from Mount Everest base camp in the snow barefoot. He walked from Cairns to Sydney, to Sydney, Manly in Sydney, 3,000 kilometres barefoot, to start conversations around mental health. And of course, as he went through Ballin or wherever it was, where James was at the time, here's a photo of the two of them on the Campfire project where the Barefoot Dutchman's holding a pair of socks. So what else do you give the Barefoot Dutchman when you meet him in the street? A yellow sock.
Yeah, and I think you point on a poignant thing there, Alan, with depression in particular. The art of conversation Because if you can have a conversation with somebody who is, you know, got the label of depression and begin that journey and let them explain why they're depressed, what's happening for them, that's often the first point of opening for them to get into that emotional freeing space where they can free themselves through conversation, I think. And if you can have a conversation starter, you know, like a pair of socks or whatever it is, that's often a great place to begin. And I think, you know, there has to be a beginning point in everybody's journey. And for many, it is the conversation. And I would urge anybody, you know, watching in, listening in, please have a conversation, you know, just start the conversation. Right.
That's such a great point, Adrian, because the reaching out for help when you are in the thickness of it is often the most challenging part. And so many people, like in particular in my group, I have so many conversations with people, and I constantly reach out to people behind the scenes. And I love it.
Yeah, real mates talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need a lot more of that, because so often people reach out to me when they're at a state where, like, I just don't know what to do anymore. I just need help with this. And then they tell me, I've been sitting on the sidelines in your group for like 2 years or 3 years, for 1.5 years, whatever, just sitting on the sidelines. And I so often post in my group saying, you know, it is okay to sit on the sidelines, but we are here to listen, you know. And I understand that this reaching out, the first step, is so hard. And people, you know, I had so many private messages from people. I said, I don't know. I always say, let's jump on a call. Let's just talk. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm just here to listen. I just want to know where you're at, so I can point you in the right direction, or just sit with you and listen, whatever you want. I just got another thumbs up. Anyway, so the beautiful thing is that when people say, you know, I wouldn't know where to start, I would just sit here and cry. I say, that's okay. I just sit with you. Absolutely, and you can cry with me. That's fine. And often it's the starting point that we need, just to open that valve, so, you know, something can come out. And once the valve is open, it's really almost impossible to close it again, you know. I love that.
If you're sitting there with somebody, I always say 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. You know, you sit there with and you listen, you watch, and when you're talking, you ask questions. And when you've asked every question you can think of, there's always one more, and that is, what you've been telling me, this is what I've understood. Have I got it right? As you said before, Adrian, it's, you know, we're tribal people. We want to feel that we belong. For somebody to sit there and hold someone's space is the most special thing you can do. You don't have to, people say, I don't know what to say. Don't have to say anything. You just have to be there. That person then will feel that they belong, that somebody is finally listening to them. They're not wanting for someone to talk back at them. They just want someone to listen. And that's the greatest gift you can give anyone.
Yeah,
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So beautiful.
Yeah, it's a bit like what Bob was sharing, you know, when he said he was walking down the corridor. He didn't say to the people, I'm depressed. What he said, I'm lost and vulnerable, you know. So he really defined actually what was actually happening for him, you know, beyond that label of depression. And I think this is a point where we have to have the conversations, getting people, you know, what's truly going on for you. Are you lonely? Do you have self-doubt? Do you have lack of self-love? You know, what's the core aspect that's going on for you where you've been labeled depressed? And once people can name it, they can certainly claim it. And I think that's the gift of the conversation.
Recognize the emotion and not worry about the label.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because emotions are real. You know, labels are often not real.
The only place for labels for me is in the supermarket, so I know where I want. You know, I'm just a human being, not a human doing. I do not do anything to justify my existence in this reality. And I think I feel that there is a whole world of difference between listening with the heart and hearing with the mind. And most people, especially in our society that's riddled with codependent behavior, have only learned how to hear with the mind. Listening with the heart is different. That's why I like using the talking stick, because I say, I do not come here expecting agreement, for all are unique. I simply expect acceptance and validation of my own reality. And by sitting with somebody and holding their space, that's what you're doing. You're accepting, like, you know, I remember an ex-girlfriend of mine, I took her out for a dinner, chili mussels in Freo, and she was bawling her eyes out because her last boyfriend that lasted about 6 weeks, she liked triathletes, you know. So, and he dumped her, you know, and she's crying her eyes out. And I'm sitting there just holding hands, beaming love at her. And she said, "Well, what's up with you? There's me crying my heart out and you're just looking so serene." And I said, "You know what I'm doing?" She said, "No." I said, "I am witnessing a beautiful human being that is doing precisely what it needs to do in this moment to heal." Yeah. Wow, that was pretty powerful.
Yeah. But when you do
It
that,
is.
you're allowed
There's
to
not many people
dissipate.
can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just about sitting in somebody's presence, isn't it, often, and just allowing them to start that conversation so they can release those emotions. I think it's
good boundaries are essential, though, aren't they? You know, that's a
absolutely
very sensitive.
Always.
Person. Yeah. And for me, my boundaries are the golden frame around the masterpiece that is me.
all with you. Yeah.
Yeah, this is like with the one-on-ones. I just like there to sit. I introduce the person and I ask them that one question, which is, you know, what you're doing today or where you at today. You know, tell us your journey, how you got there. And I know a lot of people were saying before, Alan sits there for 45 minutes and doesn't say a word. Is he profiling them? No, I did that in the first couple of seconds I met you. But you know, the whole thing is holding that space, because it's not my story. It's their story, and it's not my place to ask questions when they're expressing themselves. If I interrupt them, it's their unconscious mind that's finally talking to their conscious mind and they're getting the message through. And people say, "That's the best therapy I've had." And I go, yeah. And if you want to thank the therapist, go look in the mirror and say thank you. Because you're the one who gave it. All I did was just hold your space.
Yeah. I know nothing as a therapist. I know nothing.
I know nothing.
I think, Alan, I think in terms of what you've created, you know, with the campfire from a physical and non-physical perspective, and that idea of campfire, if we can get people back around the campfire, whether that's in reality or just, you know, on screen these days, that is the beginning for unfolding that pathway out of depression in many ways, because we're starting the conversation. And I think, you know, probably over the years, just people connecting in around this campfire and many other tens of thousands of campfires across the planet, that's been the unhinging of their depression in many ways, because they've started the conversation around the campfire. I think it's just a beautiful metaphor to have that campfire idea where we can have that discussion. I think it's just, you know, what we've shared today around the campfire. Hopefully it's helped, you know, people with that idea that they've got depression to reach out, start the conversation and release themselves from that label. I think it's a beautiful gift that we've shared today. It's just been amazing.
Yeah, well, we'll be having a lot of real campfires early in the new year. We'll be having one in Sydney at the Scouts camp down there. They've got about 36 hectares of property. They've got accommodation for those that want to be inside. I know a lot of people like 5-star accommodation. I'll have my swag and I'll be out under the 1 million star qualification.
Not just 5. It's not enough. Yeah.
But you can bring your didgeridoo, mate, and we'll do some didging again. It's been a while.
Talking about depression, I did a course with Adrian about learning how to play the didge. I still couldn't get my circular breathing. So, but no, haven't given up. But
just practice, mate. 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day.
But we're going to have a few of those. There's going to be a few things leading up to Christmas. Skype's going to do 12 days of Christmas. So from the 12th of December to the 24th around Frankston and other places, I'll be out every day talking to people. Hopefully there'll be one later this in November as well, that I'll be down in Melbourne. And I want to do a bit of a tour up the coast, Sunshine Coast, etc., and go to different locations and get out, find somewhere and have a campfire and stay overnight. So we'll be looking at doing that a lot more, and then hopefully televising that to while we're there, doing some lives. And I'd love to see, as the numbers grow around the world, all the different countries having campfires in those.
Well, come up to the Whitsundays, mate. Come up to the Whitsundays. It's beautiful up here.
Look at doing that. There's
I've been there twice this year. Yay.
Well, drop in next time.
I didn't realize you were up at the Whitsundays. There you go. Yeah, I was in Early Beach in January and then in August for my birthday.
When we're sitting around the campfire, We'll have our socks on as well.
I love it.
Love
Oh,
it.
that is so
Love it.
The
cool.
socks, we've got the socks and that, but you'll have to provide your own sexy legs. Those are mine.
Yeah.
You don't get those.
I love the way you've curled your legs around on yourself, mate. Is that like
Don't ask me how I've done that.
the ultimate yoga pose? The ultimate yoga. Yeah.
Oh,
So I
incredible.
don't even have a pair of shoes.
Yeah, that's clever.
It's actually the best pair of socks I've ever worn. They're so comfortable as well.
Mhm.
But the
That's
fact
awesome.
when you know the story of them, it just gives extra comfort to it. It's not just comfort to your feet; it's comfort to your heart as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm.
Socks for the heart and soul.
Yeah. So as we've been going through this, we've talked about because quite often we do these talks, people just talk about what we should be doing, etc. But today we've had a lot of passion in what we've been talking about. We've been talking about what we've been through ourselves as well and what we've found as solutions. And that's what I love about the conversations when they go that way, because it's not just, talking heads, so-called experts, etc., but genuine people who have been through stuff and talking about what worked for them. And as Bob was saying before, what works for one person may not work for another. It may work similarly for somebody else because there are similar in their personalities, the way they think and process, but completely different for others. And that's why having different people coming on and talking about this, and it's one subject we do talk about a lot, is the emotions and the depressions and the labels and everything else, because we need to keep hearing that to break those paradigms and break those beliefs. If we can break
Certainly,
those,
Matt. Yeah, and the more we talk about it, the more people become aware, the more the changes happening across the planet, which is so exciting.
Yeah. I want to pick up one more time that was said before, and I just needed to really highlight that just by changing the wording to go from mental illness to mental health is not a solution, because we're still talking about the same thing, and that was said before, and I really wanted to pick that up one more time, because I just can't believe how many times I listen to people talk about mental health, but what they actually mean is mental illness. They're still talking about the same thing, and it's somewhat become politically incorrect to say that, but it's not. We need to name the things the way they are and then provide a solution or a pathway into health. And I just needed to highlight that one more time.
Well, my response to that is there is no such thing as mental illness. It's just another big lie that we've been programmed generations.
And place I think we can reuse the word mental is when we talk about mental processes, a structure or a flow of something that we do. Everything else should be talking about emotional. It should be emotional wellness. And do we talk about mental health, then we that's a stigma. We need to move away from that. We go, okay, what is your emotional wellness that you want to actually have? Tell us about the emotional side of things. Get rid of the word depression.
Going back to what do you want to feel? What Adrian said. Absolutely.
The only time I'll use a mental, as I said, is if somebody says, well, what's the process here? And I go, well, the mental process, the thinking process of this, and I bring them thinking back to the mental back to the word thinking. It's not, but our answers in all life is not through our thinking, it's through our emotions.
I always talk about holistic health. I say it's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And it's like having 4 tires on a car. If you take one of them off, it's a really bumpy road. So always have that physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual in unison, and it's a less bumpy road. But if you take one away, it's it's pretty bumpy. So for me, it's all about holistic health.
Well, I cut you off before, Bob. What were you going to say then?
Oh, I've lost it now. Other than the phrase that pops into my mind, and it's one of my insight posters in my latest book. But for me, thinking is the weapon of mass distraction, and the caveat to that is because while people are thinking, they're not feeling. So for me, feelings are healings. End of story. For me, thinking is the language of the mind, but feeling is the language of the soul. And it's so simple. And that's what the intellect doesn't like, because the mind likes complicated shit, And the answers are simple. I listen to my body. My body always knows what it needs. I just have to listen and obey and learn. Because if I don't, bang!
What's the old saying? Just get out of the way of yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And thanks, guys. This has been another beautiful conversation.
Thank you.
And this word experts, you know, in this phenomenon, for me, the only experts are the people that have actually worked their way through it. You don't go to university to get through this. Well, only the University of Life.
Yeah. So, knowledge will, textbooks and everything else will give you knowledge. But as far as the taking that knowledge and then putting it into an experience, that's when you get the wisdom. You don't have wisdom if there is no experience to back it up.
Yeah.
And so the experts are the people who we talk to.
Within the silence of my heart, I have found a place I call my knowing, and my knowing has no words. It's just a feeling of contentment, a feeling of powerful, a feeling of this is my connection to source.
One of my teachers used to say to me, Adrian, when you can know, you can know.
I think, if you can put words to it, then you're not there. That's the way I look at it. If you can't put words to it, and you just got that state of being, as you've been saying there before, Bob, being a being, not a doing, that's when you're actually there. Like, men who have been through initiation, they never talk to anybody else about it because it robbed the other people of the experience. They don't even need to talk about it. They just look at each other and they have a knowing of what they went through. And there's a bond and there's a connection. No words spoken. If you put words to it, you've still got work to do. Okay. Well, thanks, guys.
It's all about energy, isn't it? Now, Tesla was right. And exactly. For me, what works for me in my life is, and this is a conscious activity, what I radiate, I create. So I consciously choose to radiate joy. And guess what comes back?
Exactly. You smile at somebody and what happens? They mostly smile back. If they may resist it the first time around, depending on what
you try again,
the decision they've made, but if a few more people are smiling, sooner or later it breaks through.
And if the smile doesn't work, wave those socks in front of them. That's definitely.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for being here, guys. This has been absolutely brilliant as usual. Adrian, Bob, Marie. So,
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Pleasure again, mate. Blessings, blessings, blessings. Thank you.
Thank you. When this goes up, I'll look forward to seeing those links that you were talking about going into the comments field. And hopefully that will start more conversations again as well. And anybody else who out there who hasn't done a one-on-one who would like to do that, put your hands up. You've got Scott, you've got Angela Heiser, and you've got myself to do those, and then join in the panel discussions. I'll just ask each of you very quickly what you get out of coming into the panel discussions. Adrian, what
connection? Sorry, that's true. That's right in there.
Yeah, connection. You had to say that because you're already connected. So let's get in there. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I think the connection, but also different perspectives, Alan. I'm just in conversation. I'm always open to different perspectives, different learnings, what I can take away from my own learning, what I can put then in my toolbox for myself, from what other people share. Just hearing about grief and the idea of just tuning in, what it would be like to be a widow, for instance. It's like while I'm going through the moment, sort of contemplating that idea, then hearing somebody speak about it so openly and so beautifully is like, wow. There's a bit more research for me to do around that space of grief, and then with Bob with his story, I can follow on through that journey and go, where's my learning? It's like the whole world. Every time somebody speaks, it's like opening up an encyclopedia. It really is. So yeah, the connection and the different perspectives, Alan, and just supporting the Campfire, mate. I've been doing it for years, and I'll just continue to do it because I love the concept of what you've brought forward. I think it's just a brilliant community initiative, and I really want to support you in that as well.
Thank you. And Bob?
Well, for me, in the final analysis, all that I truly own, all that I have is my life story, my witness testimony. And what I love about coming to these gatherings is that I feel totally relaxed and free to be totally in the moment and share my story. Without regret. I have no regrets because all I have is my story and my truth. And so thank you, Alan, for providing this platform where everybody can do the same, because I believe that each and every one of us holds a piece of the puzzle. And by sharing our stories, we help to heal each other. So thanks, and thank you, Marie and Adrian, for sharing your stories.
Thank you all.
Thank you for sharing yours. Yeah.
And by the way, thanks for the accolades and everything, because I'd like to point out to everybody that I'm one of the most greediest people on the planet. Because every time I sit down here, I feel honoured. I get knowledge from everybody. I get their experience, which is even more powerful again. And I hear all the different stories. So it's a gift every time somebody sits down, either in a one-on-one, especially in a one-on-one, and also in the panel discussions. And so the reason I wanted to ask you guys that was so the people who are listening to this today, who haven't done a one-on-one, can get an idea of, hey, it's only, what do you call it? It's a value. It's not something that's going to be difficult. I've had a few people have said to me, look, they'll be lucky to talk for 15 minutes and they've still been talking 45 minutes later.
Yeah.
And no energy required in it whatsoever. So if you haven't done a one-on-one, then you want to really connect with people and feel even more connected, not feel alone, then step up for the one-on-ones and then come into the panel discussions as well. But again, Adrian, Bob, Marie, thank you very much for having been here. And we'll see you and we'll see everybody else on the next Campfire. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thanks, Ed. Cheers.
See you, gentlemen.